Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Essential Skills for Humaning. We have a fabulous guest we're talking to today, Shai Tubali. Welcome, Shai.
Hello, Christina. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Awesome. Well, before we get into the topic on essentially how to keep our minds young, can you share a little bit about your background with our audience?
Yes, of course. Well, I would say that I've been in the business of transforming human minds for nearly 3 decades, which make me sound a bit old, I guess, but this is not how I feel. I hope, especially in light of our subject today. So, and I've done so from various angles, including self-development, modernized forms of Eastern teachings and practices, all the way to radical mysticism, methods of transformation, including therapeutic techniques, including work on traumas. And PTSD and academic philosophy, blending it all together in a peculiar mix, studying Eastern and Western perspectives on self-transformation. And now what I'm trying to do is to synthesize all these three, because each is limited in its own way, but they can benefit from one another and benefit each other. So my meeting point is what I call the flexible mind. So I think this is the perfect starting point for our exploration.
I love it. Yep, the flexible mind. Now, I too see like there's, the different disciplines like neurology, spirituality, psychology. I see it all as looking at the same thing just from different perspectives. So I think it's really cool when we can kind of bridge those. So tell me a little bit more about the flexible mind. First, what is it? And then how do we make it more flexible?
Yes. Well, sometimes when we hear flexible, we just think adaptable or resilient. This is how it's been popularized. Yeah. But perhaps we can touch on this subject in a more radical way. That's why I call it radical flexibility. You see, because to contrast it with anything, with something, let's talk about the rigid mind first, because sometimes we don't acknowledge that our minds are in danger of becoming calcified or becoming crystallized.
Yeah.
And in crystallized means that at a certain point our minds become so overstuffed with information, reactions, perspectives, rigid identities, fixed narratives that would never change, that we end up, in a sense, knowing everything. This means that we already have an answer to whatever question is posed to us. That sometimes the answer is already formulated within our minds while we are pretending to listen. We have ready-made quotes for everything. We compare everything to past knowledge. We start too many sentences with "in my experience," and we rely heavily on memory when we face supposedly new experiences and knowledge. So what happens is that our brains begin to move in closed circles, just repeating past experiences and knowledge, thereby turning into what I call old minds.
Yeah.
And so this is the thing, because it's a subtle understanding of what aging really means. You see, aging means, from this perspective, a state in which we have all our identities, narratives, and perspectives complete, unquestioned, unexamined.
Yeah.
So then there's this kind of process of endless repetition of ourselves. We already know who we are. No one can ever challenge us. So the flexible mind is actually exactly the opposite. It's where we begin to experiment with mental fluidity, with the ability to encounter experiences and situations and new information, new pieces of information with fresh eyes, and truly being in a state of I'm all ears. You see, truly being attentive and unlearning everything that we have inside our minds that wouldn't give room for anything new.
Yeah.
So that is basically the flexible mind. The flexible mind is able to flow fluidly and creatively from one identity to another, from one narrative to another, from one perspective to another. It is playful. It is childlike.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. Well, and it's a great place to be a very good active listener, right? As well, because we're showing up curious. Um, wow. So this can be very tough, right? For most humans, especially in modern day. So how do we develop this flexible mind?
Well, there are, of course, plenty of techniques, practices, but we can start exploring some.
Hmm.
First of all, it's you just mentioned it. Practice listening.
Mm.
Practice listening means that when questions are posed, when we meet a certain new piece of information, observe how we react, not only externally but also internally, when we begin to pretend that we are listening, but we're not really fully here.
Yes.
We already have predetermined answers, assumptions, and knowledge, overconfident responses.
Hmm.
So beginning to notice this moment when we read a piece of news, when we are in conversations with our friends, our parents, when somebody presents an opposing political view, that we are already so clearly entrenched in our own perspective that we wouldn't even listen, we wouldn't even consider the wholeness
Yeah.
of a certain situation, the complexity of certain situations, because political realities are complex, but we want to flatten them, to oversimplify them, because we already know. We
Yes.
don't want to rethink, to reconsider, to make our views more round, more complete, deeper, subtler.
Yeah. Well, and seeing the other people as humans, I love that you brought up because yeah, it's a very political time in the U.S.
Exactly.
right now,
Exactly. That's
and
why, yes.
I know I love it too. And you'll find that people, when they find out that another individual is for a certain candidate, they automatically start thinking like, "Oh, this person's dumb," or "There's what." It's just amazing if we could just be open and actually listen and be curious about how that individual gained that perspective in life, which would then broaden ours,
Exactly.
right? Make us more flexible.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And you see, because one of my points is that the fact that we live in such a divisive world, a divided, fractured world, is because we don't cultivate this kind of flexibility.
Yeah.
So we a part of a rigid mind is dividing the world into the ultimate right and the ultimate wrong. There's
Yes.
always the one who is right, and the one who is right is always me, of course. So now we live with 8 billion people who are sure that they are always right.
Uh-huh.
So this means that they can never be wrong, and only the others can ever be wrong.
Hmm.
And then we are unable to even admit that we might sometimes be wrong,
Yeah.
which is only human, but
Right.
we wouldn't admit that in a deep way that could actually enable us to begin to notice the relativity of our perspectives.
Yeah. We all like to be the hero of our own stories, right?
Exactly. And then the other side, the other camp is almost like it's like almost in the Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's the ultimate good fighting
Of
against the
course.
ultimate bad, which is always on the other side.
Yes,
Yes.
always, right? Yes. Now, I know in some of your work, you talk about psychological transformation and spiritual transformation. Can you
Right.
share a little bit about that and how this applies to the flexible mind?
Yes, that's a very interesting point, because you see, one of the things that interested me the most as someone who also deals with therapy
Mm-hmm.
is the fact that some people exhibit a far greater ability to let go of the past, for instance.
Yeah.
They can let go of the past. You tell them in therapy session, now after you've understood the nature of your trauma, the nature of your difficult memory, now let's allow it to dissolve. Now, some people would say would react with resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Some would be happy to be relieved of this baggage, of this burden of the past. Now, why is that? And one of the things that I've come to understand is that this is often because of an inflexible mind. An
Mm-hmm.
inflexible mind finds it easy to let go.
Mm-hmm.
You see? This is why, by the way, meditation is one of the key practices to a flexible mind, because it enables us to begin to look at certain thoughts, at certain emotions, and disengage from them, being
Yes.
able to let go of changing sensations, changing thoughts, changing narratives.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think some people can have actually exactly the same trauma
Mm-hmm.
when they were children. Some may have been abandoned when
Mm-hmm.
they were children, but in a way that is actually similar to the experience of others. Now, some of them will experience post-traumatic growth,
Mm-hmm.
whereas others will be simply unable to let go of that memory, retelling that narrative, um, reinforcing that narrative continuously.
Yeah.
And this is the thing: when our narrative begin to become our identities, our fixed identities, we use our narratives to hold on to certain identities, to knowing who we are.
Mm-hmm.
We would find it much more difficult to simply leave the past behind. So this is, I think, how therapy is related to that.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about that sounded like psychological transformation, and I love
Yes.
post-traumatic growth, right? What about how does spiritual transformation relate to that?
Well, that's a beautiful point, because
Mm-hmm.
what we are realizing for instance, in meditation, I think probably the greatest gift that we've been given by Eastern traditions, Eastern philosophies, is the idea that our minds are already free, are inherently free.
Mm-hmm.
That if you delve into the ground, the essence of the mind, you will come to realize that it's already free, that it's in a way that it has a certain nature, essential condition that has nothing to do with any identities, perspectives, narratives, and it is the truth right here, right now.
Yeah.
So when we are, I think I would say that the flexible mind derives from that realization. It's at a certain point where you begin to be able, through meditation and Eastern practices, to experience that your mind it can be stripped off of all identities, narratives, perspectives, and just remain in a state of total freedom.
Mm.
Total freedom. And what I would add to that total freedom is that from that total freedom, this is the moment where you can reinvent your life. You
Yes.
see?
Yes. I love it.
Yes.
Okay, so we have showing up curious and letting go of those narratives that we're creating about pretty much everything, every moment of the day. Meditation helps with that, showing up curious and active listening. Are there some other strategies that people can tap into that we could discuss today?
Oh yes, so there
Yeah. I mean, I
are.
know there's
Do,
lots, but
do we have
what
7
can we
hours for
focus on?
that? Well, I would like to consider some practices. Let's say there is the process of unlearning. Unlearning is one of my favorite practices. This means that you bring up a certain question. It can be about anything, because questions, they help us unveil all those all these secret storage of past answers, ready-made reactions. So let's say I ask myself, what is the ideal way to live, or what is the meaning of life? Then I take a piece of paper and I begin to simply pour out all my ready-made responses to this question. I use the question as something that illuminates all those convictions and overconfident reactions, but also confusions, inner contradictions. Write it all down until you feel that you no longer have any reasonable answer, including all kinds of conflicting emotions in relation to the question. And then just look at that paper and get rid of it. Which means that even if you think that some of your answers are, the result of a proud and glorious past learning, insight into the present, insight into reality, and being open to future experiences requests us to somehow clean our heads and to feel that we have this kind of fresh eyes of a newborn. So that's one good practice. I will give you one example of that perhaps is the best metaphor for that, for the rigid mind and the
Please.
flexible mind. And this is, there have been many studies, fascinating studies about music, how it turns out that people somewhere at the age of 30 or 33 stop searching for new music.
Really?
Yes, they still
Well, I
stop.
do love 80s music, but go ahead.
They stop searching actively for new music, for new artists also, and they begin to simply rely on some sort of nostalgia bias. They say
Yeah.
they don't make that music anymore, and they begin to listen repeatedly to the old and familiar tunes.
Okay, I can kind of relate to that, but go ahead.
So, so now this is a universal phenomenon, and it's actually the perfect analogy for a certain condition in which we settle down, or we settle into certain patterns of our minds and no longer challenging them with new pieces of information. So one is removing, discarding all kinds of previous ready-made answers, and the other is beginning to expose ourselves intentionally to new pieces of music, because that immediately forces our brains to create new connections, new pathways, for accommodating this kind of music, which it initially receives with discomfort, with resistance. It says, I don't need that. I have my old tunes. So I need to learn to expose myself to challenging information, to challenging knowledge, to challenging perspectives. Things that I identify, I recognize that my mind instantly pushes away. This is probably my hint. This is probably my sign. Don't push it away. Stay with it. see if it perhaps undermines some of your assumptions, because it might be actually for the better.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Well, and you can even, take that into other areas like movies, books,
Exactly.
cultures, countries, visiting different, areas, anything that we can experience
Exactly.
new. Yeah, cool.
Exactly. Podcasts.
I love it. Podcast, yes. It helps, have us look at different perspectives. There's a couple of there's two other things I like to do too, is
Yes.
asking myself, like, what am I learning from this person or this situation? What is this teaching me? Especially if I'm frustrated about something. And then I also like to do like maybe someone's behavior or something they said. What's another way I can view this? And then like do like a whole laundry list of possible explanations for their behavior, just so that I can try to train my brain that it's not necessarily what my go-to assumption is. There's so many other reasons this person could be doing this particular thing or saying this particular thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, first of all, I would say that we could add the question: how can my perspective become broader as a result of
Yes.
this encounter? Which means there may be, first of all, our assumption needs to be that life is complex and
Yeah.
that situations are complex. Complex does not imply complicated.
Yes.
Complex actually means being able to have an integrative view.
Mm.
So this includes also looking from the other's eyes, or from their point of view. How do they perceive reality?
Yeah.
And can I attain a deeper empathy when I begin to be able to put myself in their shoes, and to understand why they feel as they feel. One of the practices that I recommend is to broaden our perspective in a way that it's as if we look at the situation from the outside, or from a drone
Oh,
view,
yeah.
or from a bird's eye vision, as if we're looking not only from our eyes at them as us versus them,
Yeah.
but as a complete situation, and
Mhm.
then seeing the relative nature of our perspectives, but also see that there may be some truth in what they say, how they think, and perhaps this can even challenge us and integrate another dimension, that a certain part of us
Mhm.
that we've denied or rejected,
Mm.
and now we can perhaps include it in our. It's like it's an overlooked part of ourselves.
Yeah. I love that. Well, and I think also part of, I know some of your work is focused on tapping into the, um, what is it called? The consciousness, the, like the shared
Expand,
consciousness.
expanded states of
I think
consciousness,
so. Yeah.
perhaps.
So yeah, like I'm almost thinking of Carl Jung's work
Uh-huh.
on, I can't remember what it's called, like the expanded or the collective consciousness.
Yes, yes, I've
How does that?
spoken about that.
Yes, yeah. So how does that tap into having a flexible mind, or how does that relate?
Well, I think collective consciousness is in a sense. Usually, when I talk about it, it's from the perspective of how we can free ourselves
Mhm.
from from a certain collective trance, because there are certain ways in which the collective um, shapes minds. For instance,
Yeah.
we assume that it's obvious that we all have to have fixed identities, rigid identities, national identities, um, identifying with some tribe,
Yeah.
and having this us versus them mentality. So changing the collective consciousness starts with changing our own minds. You
Yeah.
see, because we need to start a certain revolution in which we no longer participate in this kind of way of thinking, which actually keeps us all trapped in a terribly disharmonious world.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Now, before we get to your products and or services, is there anything else on this topic? Well, and your final piece of advice. Is there anything else on this topic you want to share with the audience?
Well, I would just recommend that we begin to notice all these subtle processes of mental aging. You see, and to promise ourselves to have this kind of deep confidence that we are able to experience renewal at every age. Actually, young people can have old minds, and old people, physically, chronologically old people, can have extraordinarily young minds. Actually, what I call ageless minds. I would do we have a moment for one story?
Sure, please. Yeah.
There is a very interesting study about old people who came to participate in certain tests. Now, they were asked initially, how old do you feel you are subjectively? And most of them evaluated their age as significantly younger than how they actually were. Now, then they told them, the researchers, now you are going to enter memory tests. And 5 minutes after they just heard that they were entering memory tests, they evaluated their age as significantly older.
Oh, wow.
Yes, so this is a very important indication that we actually that our minds can actually become tethered to a certain self-perception that limits us and makes us feel older than we actually are. And our minds can use this innate freedom to unburden themselves from any kind of limiting self-perception. So identify those self-limiting perceptions, what you feel that you cannot do, that it's not for you anymore, that it's not your time, it's too late, and begin to regain this kind of inherent freedom.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So I'll consider myself 30. Which was 20 years ago, but we'll consider myself. I love it.
That's the good thing about subjective age, and
yes.
it actually impacts our well-being. So that's
I'm already ready to go jump and get on the tennis court or something. I love it.
That's good.
So could you share a little bit about your products and or services that you want our audience to know about?
Well, I'd simply invite everyone to visit my official website, shaitubali.com, or simply explore my YouTube channel under my name, which contains more than 800 videos.
Wow.
These include so many guided meditations and teachings on the flexible mind and practical advice. So just explore. It's like an entertainment park of consciousness.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I'll make sure and put those in the show notes so people can just follow the link.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. What's your final piece of advice for our audience members?
Well, remember that there is a certain gap. This is what meditation shows us, that there is a certain gap between our mind, our awareness, our listening, and every thought, emotion, or sensation that we may have. Every memory, every narrative, every identity. This gap is the gap of our awareness, but also a gap of choice. We can choose whether we want to identify with it or not. We are not victims of our own minds. We can become masters of our own minds by maintaining this gap, choosing rightly, being able to pick the best thoughts that can truly develop us and fill our lives with happiness.
That's empowering. I love it. Oh, thank you so much for joining us today, Shai. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills, and until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.